The rain had been falling for hours, turning the city into a gray mirror of flickering lights and empty promises. Expensive cars hissed through puddles, and neon signs blinked over half-shuttered shops. Outside a private restaurant, the kind that only Power ever walked into, a little girl stood alone. No umbrella, no coat, just a red ribbon in her hair, plastered to her face by the rain. She couldn't have been more than 7. Her small hands clutched a soaked piece of paper, ink bleeding, letters dissolving. But she didn't move. She just waited. Inside, Luca Moretti, the most feared Mafia boss in the city, was laughing with his men. The sound of polished glasses, deep voices, and money-soaked confidence filled the room. He had power, loyalty, fear, everything except peace. And then the guard came in. "Boss, there's a kid outside." Luca didn't look up. "Then send her home. What do I look like? A babysitter?" "She says her mama told her to find you." The words froze the table. Fork stopped midair. Every man in the room turned to the boss, their faces pale, uncertain. Luca's hand, tattooed and steady, set his glass down. "Repeat that," he said quietly. The guard swallowed. "She said, 'My mama told me to find you. She's been waiting out there in the rain.'" No one spoke. For the first time that night, Luca's face shifted, just slightly. That phrase hit like a ghost whispering his name. He stood, slowly. "Bring her in." The door opened, and the sound of rain rushed in with her, that raw, metallic scent of wet pavement and innocence. The little girl stepped inside, her shoes squelching, her eyes big and solemn. She looked like she'd been standing there forever. Luca's men stared, but she didn't look at any of them. Her gaze locked on Luca immediately. "Are you Mr. Moretti?" she asked softly. He nodded, confused. "Who sent you?" The girl held out the crumpled paper with trembling fingers. "My mama said to find you. She said you'd keep your promise." Luca took the note. The ink had run, but he could still make out a few words, a name he hadn't heard in over 8 years. His heart punched against his ribs. A long silence filled the room. The sound of the rain outside became almost deafening. He looked back at the girl, voice low and dangerous. "What's your mother's name?" The little girl hesitated, the kind of pause that changes everything. Then she whispered, "Isabella." The glass in Luca's hand slipped and shattered against the floor. The restaurant's velvet hush cracked around the name like thunder. Isabella. Luca Moretti hadn't said it out loud in 8 years. He had learned to bury names the way other men buried bodies, deep, quiet, and under enough concrete that even memory couldn't breathe. Yet there it was, lifted by a 7-year-old with rain in her eyelashes. He didn't realize he was gripping the crumpled note too tightly until the wet paper tore in his hand. "Close the doors," he said. Chairs scraped. The bodyguards moved without question, shutting the street out with a heavy thud. The laughter, the wine, the game of being untouchable, all of it vanished as if dragged under the tide. The girl stood near the entrance, small and still, the red ribbon a single flame in a gray world. A puddle grew around her shoes, thin rivers running off the hem of her dress. "What's your name?" Luca asked. "Sophia." "And your mother? Where is she now?" Sophia's gaze dropped to the puddle. "She said to find you. She said you'd know what to do." A muscle flickered in Luca's jaw. That was Isabella's way. Never plead, just point you at a horizon and trust you'd walk there. Marco, his oldest lieutenant, shifted beside him. "Boss, this stinks. Could be a setup. A kid's the best bait." Luca didn't look away from the girl. "Search the block, 2 streets out. If there's a lens on this window, I want to know who's behind it." Men peeled off into the rain. He crouched so his eyes were level with Sophia's. Up close, he saw goose flesh on her arms, the small tremor of her hands. She'd been out there longer than the guard admitted. A burn of anger rose. At the guard, at the storm, at the world that treated children like messages written on damp napkins. "Who brought you?" he asked softly. "I walked." "From where?" She thought for a moment, measuring the room with a glance older than 7. A very tall building with a broken elevator. Mama said we don't stay long places. A safe house, then. The old street in him translated the code immediately. Always moving, never a pattern, don't leave footprints, just the idea of them. He unfolded the ruined note carefully and flattened it against the table. Most of the ink had bled into a bruise, but enough remained to form a map in his mind. A phone number, 3 words, you promised once, and a sketch of a lark. The lark had been Isabella's joke. If you hear the lark at dawn, run. The hunters wake late. I know that bird, he murmured. Sophia's head lifted. Mama draws it when it's serious. When did you see her last? This morning. A tremor ran through the word. She put the ribbon back in my hair and kissed here. Sophia pressed a finger to her temple. She said, Find Mr. Moretti if the rain begins. Then the rain began. A pattern interrupt rippled through the men. Glances exchanged, muttered calculations. Why him? Why now? Lucas stood, the note curled in his fist. The room felt smaller than it had in years, as if the air itself remembered what it had seen. He turned to the bartender. Get tea, sweet, a towel. Sophia blinked. I don't like tea. You will tonight, he said. It makes the thunder quieter. Her mouth twitched, the ghost of a smile. He watched it with a shock of recognition. Isabella had smiled like that. Thin, true, saved for when it mattered. Boss, Marco, said quietly, returning with rain still on his jacket. No tails, no vans, no cameras in the alley. But there's something else. What? We found a chalk mark on the side door. 2 lines crossed, short, long, old smuggler's sign, means move quick. Someone left it for us or for her. Luca's eyes shifted to the exit. Old tricks resurfaced like fish when the river settles. Send 2 to wipe it, and pull the cars to the back. No lights. Marco hesitated. We moving her? We're moving everything. Sophia's tea arrived, steam rising like a gentle ghost. She wrapped her hands around the cup, chasing heat. Luca watched her, then turned to the dining room, the banquettes, the paintings, the chandeliers he'd bought to convince himself he was a man who dined rather than hunted. For the first time, the place felt like what it had always been, a den with a tablecloth. Clear the room, he said. But the meeting with the Romagnas, a younger capo began. Tell the Romagnas the weather changed, Lucas said without looking at him. If they don't understand storms, they don't understand business. The men dispersed into motion. The city shifted around them, schedules torn, traffic rerouted, little eddies of chaos spiraling out from a single red ribbon. Lucas sat opposite Sophia, close enough to see the tiny nick on her chin. Your mother taught you not to talk to strangers. You're not a stranger, she said simply. You're the promise. The words landed like a blade. He remembered the night 8 years ago. A safe house above a bakery, the smell of sugar and yeast bleeding through the boards. Isabella at the window with hair clipped back in a cheap barrette. She'd said, If I call in the rain, you'll help, yes? Not because of love, because of debt. He'd wanted to say love. He'd said debt. It was easier to pay. What did your mother say about me? He asked. Sophia thought. She said you were a lion. But lions can be gentle when they choose. Marco reappeared, voice low. Boss, we got chatter on the police scanner. Unmarked cars circling the district, not ours, and... He glanced at Sophia. 2 men were seen in her building this afternoon. One neighbor heard a fight. Sophia's fingers tightened around the teacup. Mama doesn't fight. She uses eyes. Luca's chest ached in a place he'd forgotten had nerves. Isabella had disarmed rooms by seeing people more clearly than they wanted to be seen. He had hated and loved her for it. We're leaving, he said. Now. To where? Marco's tone carried its own map of fears, cops, rivals, the long ledger of sins that never quite balanced. Sanctuary. He looked down at Sophia. They threaded through side streets, weaving a pattern only old wolves knew. Left, right, double back, pause under the stone bridge where the GPS lost its breath. The wipers beat time like a nervous heart. Halfway to the church, Marco's phone buzzed. He put it on speaker. A woman's voice. low, tight with adrenaline. You took your time, Moretti. Luca's hand tightened on the headrest. Isabella. Sophia lifted her head so fast her ribbon flicked the glass. Mama? The voice softened. Hey, little lark. Sophia laughed and began to cry at the same time, a sound that cut new doors in Luca's chest. He swallowed. Where are you? Counting exits, she said, and he could hear the smile she wore when chaos served her. 2 men with a silver car and a bad conscience. I sent one to sleep. The other ran. I left you a bird. I saw. You kept your number, she said, approving, as if he were a student who had finally turned in homework on time. Who's hunting you? He already knew the answer he feared. Not cops. Cops didn't draw larks in chalk. Men who can't read weather, she said. The kind who sell fear by the container. You have a hole left in your kingdom, Luca. Someone crawled through. The docks, he said. The Russians, not only them. Men who speak too many languages and mean none. Listen, don't go home. Don't go to the villa. And don't trust your oldest friend, silence rang. Marco's eyes flashed to Luca in the mirror. Boss, Luca raised a finger. He knew which oldest friend she meant, and it wasn't Marco. A different shadow. A different ledger? Where do we meet? He asked. Isabella exhaled. Where we said we never would. He closed his eyes. The old church on Via San Michele, the one that had held their first and last argument. 10 minutes. Make it 6. The rain's getting smarter. The line clicked dead. Sophia wiped her cheeks with her fist. She's okay? She's moving, Luca said. Moving is better than hiding. The car crested the hill, the church's bell tower rising from the mist like a finger lifted in warning. Lights glowed warm behind stained glass, saints frozen in colors that never learned the cost of mercy. Marco pulled to the curb. You sure about this? No, Luca said. That's why it's right. They stepped into the wet night. The bells didn't ring, too late for that, but the city's pulse gathered around the steps, a hush inside a storm. At the doors, Sophia hesitated. Do lions pray? Luca's mouth curved. Only when larks tell them to. They pushed inside. Incense. Old wood. Shadows like folded wings. A handful of candles guttered in their red glass cups. A woman knelt 2 pews from the front, her back to them, hair pinned up in the simplest way, as if time had learned manners and left her alone. Sophia ran. Mama! Isabella turned, and 8 years fell off Luca's life like a coat he didn't need anymore. She opened her arms. Sophia collided with her, ribbon and rain and relief. Isabella looked over her daughter's shoulder at him. The same eyes, the same impossible calm. You kept the promise, she said. He managed a breath that felt like standing after a long sleep. You called in the rain? A faint smile touched her mouth. And you still arrive with thunder. Before the relief could soften into something dangerous, a shadow crossed the stained glass. Fast, deliberate, wrong. Isabella's gaze slid past him to the door. We have visitors, she said calmly. Tell me you finally learned how to pray and shoot at the same time. Luca turned, heartbeat suddenly clear as a bell. The inciting incident was no longer a little girl in the rain. It was the past, walking through the present with muddy feet, and the promise he had made long ago demanding its payment in full. The doors of the church didn't close behind them this time. They slammed. The echo carried like thunder down the marble nave. Luca spun instinctively, pulling Sophia behind him as Marco drew his gun. The shadow outside became 2, then 3. Men moved across the rain-slick steps. Not priests, not worshippers. You could tell by the way they carried silence like a second weapon. Isabella stayed kneeling for a heartbeat longer, finishing a prayer that wasn't for herself. Then she stood, the candlelight painting her in gold and danger. They found us faster than I hoped. Who are they? Luca asked. The same men who bought the port from under you. He swore softly. So it's not just about you. It never is, she said. A window shattered. Stained glass scattered across the pews like jewels. One of the men outside shouted in Russian, an order, short and final. The storm had delivered more than rain. Luca's instincts came roaring back, the old rhythm his body never forgot. He pushed Sophia toward Isabella. Take her. Go to the vestry. I can handle a gun, Isabella said. I remember, he shot back. A second crash and another window gone. The church became a cage of broken light and noise. Marco fired twice. 2 dark figures dropped near the entrance, but another took their place immediately. Sophia clutched her mother's hand, her voice tiny but steady. "Mama, that's thunder, right?" Isabella smiled even now. "Yes, baby." "Just thunder." They moved toward the back hall, skirts of incense trailing behind them. Luca and Marco covered the retreat, bullets echoing through centuries of faith. The crucifix above the altar tilted slightly, as if even Christ was leaning in to watch. When they reached the rear corridor, Isabella stopped short. "The door's blocked," Marco cursed. "They're coming around the side." Luca scanned the hallway. The air tasted like dust and gunpowder. "There's another way, through the crypt." Isabella raised an eyebrow. "Of course you'd know the exits in a church. I donate often," he said dryly. They descended the narrow steps. The deeper they went, the quieter it became. Sophia clung to Isabella's hand, wide-eyed but silent. She didn't cry. That alone told Luca everything about what kind of child she was. Isabella's kind. Brave by necessity. Quiet by training. They emerged from the crypt into the courtyard behind the church, their shoes sinking into mud that smelled of old roots and wet stone. The city around them seemed muffled by the rain, its violence taking a breath. Marco scanned the rooftops. "We can't stay out in the open. Whoever's running this has men everywhere." Luca nodded, thinking fast. "The monastery on the hill, they still owe me a favor. I gave them protection when the city forgot their name." "Protection," Isabella murmured. "You mean you paid them to hide your guns?" Luca gave a small smirk. "Then they'll hide us too." But Isabella wasn't smiling. She was watching Sophia. How the child stared at the rain like she was trying to read it. "She doesn't know who you are," Isabella said softly. "Then don't tell her yet," Luca replied. "Let her think I'm a man who owes her mother a promise." "She already knows promises aren't free." The words cut more deeply than she intended. He looked at her, really looked at her, and saw exhaustion threaded with something unbroken. "What did you get us into, Isabella?" Her eyes lifted to the horizon. "Not what, who?" He followed her gaze. Between the rain and lightning, the city glowed faintly orange. The docks. His empire's lungs. That was where all trouble started and ended. She continued quietly. "You were right. The Russians. But they weren't just smuggling money or arms. They were moving people, families, children." Luca's brow tightened. "Trafficking." Isabella nodded. "I stumbled into it when I went looking for work after leaving you. I thought I was cleaning ledgers. Instead, I was cleaning blood. So I took the evidence, a drive. Names, routes, buyers. It's why we've been running." The air went still. Even Marco stopped moving. "They want the drive," Luca said. "They want to erase the only witness who can't be bought. My daughter." Sophia looked between them, confusion in her small face. "Mama, am I in trouble?" Isabella knelt. "No, my love. You're the reason they can't win." Luca turned away, trying to hide the storm in his eyes. "So the girl's my blood, the Russians want her alive, and the city's turning into a battlefield over a piece of metal. You could have told me sooner." "I tried," Isabella said, her voice low but steady. "But you stopped listening to anyone who wasn't afraid of you." That hit harder than any bullet could. For a long moment, they stood there, the rain softening into mist. Luca finally spoke. "We'll go to the monastery. Marco, clear the road ahead. Isabella, keep the girl close. I'll deal with the men chasing us," she frowned. "You can't fight all of them." "I don't need to," he said, lighting a cigarette. "Just enough to make the rest remember who they're hunting." But before he could move, a small hand tugged at his sleeve. Sophia looked up at him, her voice trembling but certain. "You'll come back, right?" He knelt, forcing a smile he didn't feel. "Little one, lions always come back when the storm ends." She studied his face for a moment, then nodded as if deciding she could believe him. They split. Marco went ahead in one of the cars, Isabella and Sophia in the other. Luca stayed behind just long enough to watch the taillights vanish into the fog. Then he slipped through the alley, gun drawn, his shadow melting into the city he once ruled. Hours passed. The monastery stood like a forgotten crown on the hill, stone walls slick with moss, candles glowing faintly through rain-streaked glass. The old abbot opened the gate himself. "Moretti," he said with a sigh that was half memory, half warning. "I should have known the thunder would bring you back," Luca smiled faintly. I need sanctuary. You always do. The abbot's gaze fell on the girl peeking from behind Isabella's coat. His expression softened. And this time, it's not for you. They entered the chapel. It smelled of wax and lavender. Sophia wandered to the nearest pew, tracing her fingers along the smooth wood. Isabella sat beside her, whispering something only mothers can say in the dark. Luca stood near the altar, staring at the flickering candles. Their light wavered over his hands that had taken, built, destroyed. You still light these for forgiveness? He asked. The abbot shrugged. No one lights candles for angels anymore, only for those trying not to become devils. Luca's laugh was dry, hollow. Then I've been keeping the wrong company. Not tonight, the abbot said. That child changed the air when she walked in. I felt it. Luca turned toward Sophia. The girl had fallen asleep on a pew, her ribbon drying against the wood. He felt something he hadn't in years. Stillness. Isabella approached quietly. You're thinking too loud? Can't help it, he said. You drop a storm in my lap and expect me to stay calm. I expected you to do what you do best, she said. Survive, he studied her. You think that's all I'm good at? I think survival is what love looks like when the world stops pretending it's fair. He almost smiled. That sounds like something you'd write on a goodbye note. She looked away. Maybe I did. A faint sound broke through the quiet, the click of a door unlocking. But it wasn't from the front gate. It came from deeper inside, the old library sealed for decades. The abbot frowned. That door hasn't opened since you hid the archive, Luca finished. The monks kept ledgers. Smugglers used to pay you to store things there. Maybe someone still does. They moved toward the corridor. Dust rose like ghosts under their feet. When they reached the heavy oak door, they found a single envelope wedged in the latch. Luca opened it. Inside, one photo, black and white, edges wet from the rain. It showed Sophia, younger by a few years, standing beside a man Luca didn't recognize. The man's face was blurred, but the ring on his hand gleamed unmistakably, a serpent eating its tail. Isabella's voice dropped to a whisper. That's their mark. The syndicate. Luca looked at her sharply. Then this isn't just the Russians? No, she said. This is older. The abbot crossed himself. Then you'd better pray the dawn comes fast. Luca's hand brushed Sophia's ribbon. The red now darkened to maroon. It will, he said quietly, because she is the dawn. The storm broke sometime after midnight, but the thunder never really left. It rolled inside the monastery walls, coiled through the empty corridors, and waited, like the city itself was holding its breath. Luca sat alone in the courtyard, cigarette glowing faintly in the dark. He hadn't slept. Couldn't. The rain had washed the blood from his hands, but not the weight. Somewhere inside the chapel, Isabella and Sophia were asleep under borrowed blankets. He could hear Sophia's soft breathing when the wind shifted, a fragile sound that somehow made him feel stronger. Marco emerged from the shadows. Boss, we've got movement. Luca didn't look up. How close? 2 miles out, maybe less. Drones over the ridge. Military models, not street toys. Someone bought expensive eyes. Luca ground the cigarette into the wet stone. They've found us. Marco hesitated. There's more. We intercepted a call on the same frequency as that trader's radio. Someone's offering a bounty, dead or alive, for the girl. Luca's jaw tightened. Name? They used one. The broker? Same ghost who ran the port auction 3 years ago. Luca exhaled slowly. The name wasn't new, but hearing it now felt like an old debt being collected. Wake Isabella, he said. We move in 10. Inside the chapel, the candles were nearly out. Isabella woke instantly at the first sound of boots on stone. She was always half awake, always listening. She wrapped her coat around Sophia, lifting her gently. What happened? She asked. They found us, Luca said. Her eyes hardened, but there was no fear, just decision. Then we don't run anymore. He looked at her, confused. Running only keeps them guessing, she said. We need to make them stop guessing. How? By ending the question. Before he could answer, the monastery lights flickered, then died completely. The air filled with the hum of approaching engines. Marco cursed under his breath. They cut the power. Luca's instincts snapped alive. Positions. We hold them here. The monks and few and old retreated to the catacombs, their prayers echoing faintly. The air outside trembled with headlights cutting through fog. A convoy. Matte black SUVs, silent, professional. Not gang muscle, mercenaries. Luca loaded his pistol. They're not here to scare us. They're here to erase a problem. And we're the problem, Isabella said. A spotlight flared across the courtyard, blinding them. A loudspeaker crackled. Luca Moretti, you're outnumbered. Hand over the girl and walk away. No more blood. Sophia stirred in Isabella's arms. Mama, they're talking about me? Isabella kissed her forehead. They're lying, baby. That's what wolves do before they bite. Luca stepped forward, his coat heavy with rain. Stay inside, he told Isabella, but she followed him anyway. If they want both of us, they'll take neither. The loudspeaker crackled again. 10 seconds, Luca counted silently. 1, 2, 3. At 5, he drew and fired. One clean shot through the spotlight. Darkness swallowed the courtyard again. Gunfire answered. Stone exploded near his feet. Marco returned fire from a balcony covering the flank. The monastery turned into a war zone. Echoes of Luca stood, holding Sophia's hand. Come on, little one. Let's go find breakfast. I hear monks make terrible coffee but good bread. Sophia giggled. Can Mama come too? He looked at Isabella, something unspoken passing between them. Yeah, he said softly. Mama comes too. They walked out together, 3 silhouettes framed by the light of a morning that finally felt earned. As they reached the gate, the abbot called after Luca. You'll have to choose who you are when the city comes asking again. Luca paused, smiling faintly without turning around. Let them ask. This time, I'll answer as a man, not a myth. He stepped into the road, Sophia skipping beside him, the red ribbon now tied loosely around his wrist. Isabella slipped her arm through his, quietly matching his stride. And as the sun broke fully over the hill, its light washed away the last shadow of the Mafia boss, leaving behind a father, a woman, and a little girl who had waited in the rain and found the dawn. The city was quiet again, that rare kind of quiet that follows both endings and beginnings. The storm had rinsed the streets clean, but it couldn't wash away what the world now knew. Across every screen, every newspaper, every whisper, the name Moretti had become something else. Not fear, not crime. Something uncertain. Something human. From the rooftop of an old apartment near the docks, Luca watched the harbor. The morning light glinted off the water, gold and broken like liquid memory. He held a cup of coffee in one hand, bitter, black, grounding. Behind him, he could hear laughter from inside, Isabella humming while making breakfast, Sophia giggling as she tried to braid her mother's hair. He took a slow breath. It still felt strange. Peace. It had a texture he wasn't used to. No noise, no betrayal, no bodyguards pacing the floor. Just the sound of waves and the smell of toast. Inside, the kitchen was small, but alive. Isabella looked up when he entered, her sleeves rolled, her eyes soft. You're awake, she said. He nodded. Couldn't sleep. Kept thinking I'd wake up back in the old world. She smiled faintly. You did. It's just smaller now. He chuckled. Smaller's not so bad. Sophia ran up, holding out a crookedly wrapped sandwich. I made this for you. Luca took it like it was treasure. Thank you, princess. I'm not a princess, she corrected with a grin. I'm a lion, like you. That stopped him. He knelt down, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Then promise me something, little lion. What? Don't roar just because others expect it. Roar only when you must protect something worth keeping. She nodded seriously, though her eyes sparkled with a wisdom beyond her age. Later, when Isabella stepped out to hang the laundry, Luca stood by the window, watching her through the sunlight. The way her movements were calm, deliberate, whole. It struck him how different this woman was from the one he'd left behind years ago. Do you ever think, he asked quietly, we could have had this sooner? If I'd been a better man? Isabella didn't look back. If you'd been different, she wouldn't exist, and I wouldn't have found the strength to become who I am now. So no, Luca. We had to break to become real. He leaned against the window frame, smiling sadly. That's the most beautiful punishment I've ever heard. She laughed, low, tired, but alive. Then take it and serve the sentence with grace. That evening, they walked down to the same street where it had all begun, the restaurant where a little girl once waited in the rain. The sign still flickered, though the name had changed. The world had moved on, as it always did. Sophia ran ahead, skipping through puddles that reflected the sunset. Luca watched her, realizing this was how peace worked, not in grand declarations or sudden absolution, but in the small, quiet things that refused to die. Isabella joined him, her hands tucked into her coat pockets. "It's strange being back here," she said. "Yeah," Luca said softly, like walking through an echo. "You ever regret not turning her away that night?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked at Sophia, who was now crouching to rescue a paper boat floating in the gutter, one she hadn't even made. Just something discarded by a stranger. "No," he said finally. "If I'd sent her away, I'd still be a king in hell." As twilight deepened, they sat on a bench facing the harbor. Lights began to flicker on across the water, one by one, like stars deciding to rise from below instead of above. Sophia leaned her head against Luca's shoulder. "Will the bad men come back?" she asked. "Some will," he said honestly. "Bad men always find a way." "Then what will we do?" He looked down at her, his voice steady. "We'll keep building something good enough to make them lose interest." Isabella smiled faintly at that. "That's your plan for redemption? Boring them into goodness?" He smirked. "It's worked on worse people." Luca knew that for every sin he'd buried, there would always be ghosts. But tonight, for the first time, he didn't feel haunted. Maybe because he wasn't running from his past anymore. He was walking beside it, hand in hand with the future it had accidentally created. The ribbon, Sophia's red ribbon, was still tied around his wrist, not as a trophy, but as a reminder. A symbol that sometimes the smallest acts of love could pull a man out of hell when bullets and empires couldn't. He turned to Isabella. "Do you think people like us deserve peace?" She thought for a moment, then answered softly, "No one deserves it. That's what makes it grace." He smiled. "Grace, huh? Never thought I'd live long enough to see it." "You didn't?" she said. "The old you died in that monastery." Luca looked out over the water. "Then I hope he stays buried." As night fell, the air filled with city sounds, soft jazz from a bar nearby, the hum of streetcars, the laughter of people who didn't know his name. For once, anonymity was his sanctuary. Sophia pointed at the moon's reflection on the water. "Look, Papa, it's two moons." He followed her gaze. "That's just the same one, mirrored." She frowned. "Then why does it look different?" He smiled. "Because even light needs something dark to show itself." She thought about that, then nodded slowly. And in that nod was all the wisdom of every generation trying to heal what came before. A single feather drifted down from the dock cranes above, landing on the surface of the water beside Sophia's paper boat. The boat rocked but didn't sink. Luca watched it float away, fragile, unarmored, still moving forward. He whispered almost to himself, "Maybe that's us." Isabella heard him. "Then let it sail." The three of them stood together. No titles, no debts, no ghosts. Just a family finally learning how to exist without a war. And when the wind picked up, carrying the scent of rain and salt and possibility, Luca closed his eyes and let it wash through him. Sometimes the people who seem furthest from redemption are the ones who understand mercy best. Luca's story isn't about crime or revenge. It's about what happens when love refuses to die in a place built for violence. Ask yourself, how many promises in your life are still waiting in the rain? Maybe forgiveness isn't about forgetting what was done, but choosing to walk beside it without hate. Tell me in the comments, what moment hit you hardest? The girl's innocence? The father's transformation? Or the idea that grace doesn't erase the past, it just outlives it? If stories like this remind you that hope can survive even in the darkest places, share it. Someone out there might need a reminder that no life is too far gone to start again.